To talk more about the cyber attack on Sony and who done it. I don't know if grammatically that's correct, but we use it colloquially. Let's call on our friend Stephen J.J. Weisman, attorney and professor at Bentley University, and as befits his webbiness, Skyping in from his busy office. So, Stephen, what's the latest on this thing? Who do you think was behind the Hollywood hack job?
You know, it's interesting, JT. One of the things that I don't think it was the proverbial disgruntled employee, which was one of the theories that was surfacing. The reason that I think some experts thought that was because the credentials of an employee were used to infiltrate the Sony computers, but those were indeed gathered by hackers from, and I'm going to still go with North Korea. There have been some experts in the last few days who have think that's actually so. The federal government is not releasing a lot of the information that they have, and with good reason. They don't want to give away information pertaining to how they decided that it was North Korea. And I don't think the federal government wanted it to be North Korea. So I do think that indeed it was North Korean hackers. I'm not sure quite whether the motive was as tied to the movie The Interview or not, because initially when the hacking occurred, that was not mentioned. It was only when the media picked up on that. But I think the bigger question is, whoever did this, who is going to make corporations around the world vulnerable to ransom hacking? And in this case, that was initially what happened. It was a request for money, but Sony didn't pay it. And I think that's going to be the real problem, is corporate espionage, not to steal secrets, as the Chinese have been doing for years, but to actually threaten the being of corporations.
Stephen, let's expand on that a little. How vulnerable do you think other U.S. companies are to a similar type of attack like this?
Well, unfortunately, the statistics show that last year about 82% of American companies were hacked. So I think they are very vulnerable. Sony was a company that was particularly vulnerable. Its security and intelligence, well, there was no intelligence in their security. They had file folders labeled passwords that were unencrypted. They didn't use sufficient passwords. They didn't isolate certain information from the internet. And these are all steps that have to be taken by corporations. And the one thing I actually am kind of find this glass half full is that this is a wake-up call to not just American, but corporations around the world, that they have got to do a better chance, because they are being hacked, and you've got to learn to protect your data.
3 minutes remain. Stephen, in terms of urban myths and disinformation surrounding this cyber attack on Sony Pictures, you said some passwords were unencrypted. We heard some reports that the company in one instance was using, quote, password as a password. Is there any veracity to that, or is this just a kind of piling on of disinformation or disreputable reports to reflect on Sony?
I wish I could say it was an urban myth. My information is that some did use the password. And an interesting thing, JD, is there have been some intelligence that have worked against the hackers and found that even hackers, many of them, use the password. They don't protect themselves as well. But the password, and what companies have got to start getting into, is dual factor authentication for sensitive materials, because passwords are just too easy to break. What we have sometimes are what called brute force attacks, where you will have the hackers, they will go against a website and they will have software that will try out millions of passwords. If you have a password that is a word in the dictionary, the company is toast. Their complex passwords have to be used, and they don't have to be that difficult. You can have a password that is, I don't like passwords, 3 exclamation points. You've got capital letters, small letters for each word. You've got symbols in there. That's good, but you've got to have strong passwords, different passwords for every account, so that if one is hacked, not all of your accounts are in jeopardy, and you've got to change them about every 6 months.
Stephen, since we last visited on the air here, The Interview is now out. It was put out via video release. We heard there was some piracy on that. With the minute that remains, your take on the interview, both as a film and as a historical phenomenon.
You know, it is fascinating if indeed this is what triggered a cyber attack on the United States. I'm one of the people, I haven't seen it yet, but I am anxious to see the interview. I don't think it's going to present a problem in theaters, but it is amazing what we had going on here, including the fact that initially Sony gave in to this kind of threat and pulled the movie. You can't have the First Amendment dependent upon a two-bit dictator in North Korea.
Fair enough. We will have to leave it there. Stephen J.J. Weisman, as always, sir, our thanks. And when there are more hackings, you're the guy we call on as the expert. We look forward to our next visit, if not the next hack job. Thanks so much, Stephen. Let us turn our attention now to today's Max to Health moment. After all the sugar you had at Christmas time, today the subject is artificial sweeteners. Take a look.
A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, but what about the fake stuff? Splenda, Sweet and Low, and Equal are the most popular substitutes, providing less calories and more sweetener. But when it comes to the healthiest option, which one is the best for you?
So I don't think one or the other is better. I believe that for diabetics, artificial sweeteners can be very helpful for controlling their blood sugar levels. I think that if your body is able to digest sugar naturally, then you're better off having the real thing, even though there is going to be calories in it. I just recommend you have a smaller amount of the real sugar.
To maintain a healthy eating habit, learn to limit the amount of sugar intake you have, whether artificial or not. Remember, the less sugar you have, the less sugar your sweet tooth craves.